Hi, I'm Whitney Espich, the CEO of the MIT Alumni Association, and I hope you enjoy this digital production created for alumni and friends like you.
Okay, everyone, 3, 2, 1, you're on. Good luck.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. This is a webinar that is sponsored by the MIT Social Entrepreneurship Alumni Group. And today is the second of a four-part series for social entrepreneurs. And the title of today's webinar is Early Journey from Concept to Pilot. So just let me do a quick introduction of SEAG. Our purpose is to promote MIT community participation in creating, fostering, and supporting social enterprises. And with that in mind, this year we are sponsoring two webinar series. An investor track webinar and an entrepreneur track webinar. So we've had the first two investor track webinars so far, and today we're doing the second entrepreneur track webinar. For those that missed the first one, you can catch it on YouTube. It was, to me, very inspiring stories that was told by Tasha from Yeastless and Jackie from SMAR. So do go back to it if you missed it. So this slide is really just to encourage you to be actively involved. This is really our first operating year, and we're having quite a bit of webinars. But next year we'd like to have more participation, possibly live discussions and whatnot. So if you are interested in getting involved, please let us know, and we would love to do that. In order to participate with us, we encourage you to join the SEAG through the MIT Alumni website or join us in our LinkedIn group. So that's the end of the intro. I'd like to turn it over to our two great speakers. Uh, it's Sona and Rebecca. Sona is a CEO and founder for her organization as well as Rebecca, and they can tell their story so much better than I can. So let me just turn over to them. Sona is welcome.
Nice to virtually meet everyone. Thanks for being here, and I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Sorry, give me 1 second. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, wherever you're based. I'm Sona, and I'm CEO and co-founder of Neopenda. So before I dive into some slides, I wanted to give a little bit of my background and how I started the company or co-founded the company, and how I got to where we are today. So in 2011, I had graduated from Georgia Tech with my undergrad degree in chemical engineering. And I finished a semester early and just wanted to travel and do something different before starting to work. So I decided to go to Western Kenya in a really remote community out there. And By remote, I meant fetching water from the river and then would have to boil it to drink. And I was out there for several months and just absolutely loved it. I think the culture in the community was beautiful, warm, and very different from the life that I was accustomed to growing up in the U.S. I was a teacher in this village and mostly taught uh, English and math, but I once taught a course in Swahili and that didn't go very well, but it was baby class, so it's all right. So a lot of the culture in the community did stick with me, but I did notice a number of inequities that also stuck with me. So fast forward, I started a job at Eli Lilly and Company. It's a pharmaceutical company in Indianapolis, and I was doing research and development there. I really loved the healthcare side of things and the engineering side, really understanding more about product development, all the regulatory red tape, just kind of the process for how healthcare companies exist. Through that process, though, I couldn't help but think that my kids in Kenya may never see the medications that I was helping make. And the inequity started to eat away at me. And so I thought I should go back to grad school and figure out how to provide more equitable access to healthcare around the world. So went to Columbia University for my master's in biomedical engineering. And in my second semester there, I met my now co-founder, Tess, and we were taking a biodesign course together where we were challenged to think about why is newborn mortality in particular so much higher in low resource settings than it is in the US. So we started doing some initial research, got some funding from the university, and used that funding to actually travel out to Uganda. And this is what we saw. We saw a room called the equipment graveyard, or a field called the equipment graveyard. And it's really just a place for nurses and doctors to put broken medical equipment. So why does this exist? And it exists in pretty much every facility we went to in Uganda. It exists because most medical technologies are not designed for 85% of the world's population. There are unique constraints that exist in a lot of these communities, anything from the instability in power or difficulty in maintaining wireless connectivity, or the dust gets in the equipment and it breaks it. So all sorts of conditions that really make equipment fail. So using our biomedical engineering backgrounds, we decided to devote ourselves to Neopenda, and really focus on solving this issue of medical equipment not designed for the communities in emerging markets. So, of course, patients are the ones that suffer most from the strain of equipment. This is a ward in Uganda, and in this particular ward, there were 150 babies and only 2 nurses. And these are critically ill babies, so it is a matter of life and death for them. And when we were in this ward, these nurses were walking around frantically trying to figure out which baby actually needed attention. In the US, there is very different equipment, and I'll show that in the next slide, but the lack of equipment attributes to a lot of the statistics that we see on this slide here. Just too many newborns are dying from preventable causes, and this is things like hypothermia. The baby is just too cold. We have known and proven methods of actually improving their quality of care. We just don't know when they're sick. So I wanted to give you a landscape of what does this look like around the world. So the image on the left is what we see in the US. Every baby is hooked up to thousands of dollars of medical equipment, hundreds of thousands of dollars of medical equipment, including continuous monitors. So there's a much higher nurse to baby ratio. Babies have a better chance of surviving here because we can detect that something is wrong. Now, there are a lot of global health interventions that exist around the world, a lot of people that are starting to look at specific disease states and understand what's going on with patients, but it typically focuses on responding to the specific disease burden. So a diagnostic for hypothermia or a diagnostic for pneumonia, for example. So this is kind of what we see in emerging markets and global health. So in reality, these nurses do have to make do with manual methods, manually measuring pulse rate, counting the breaths that a baby may have. And so in this time, babies that are in trouble go unnoticed, and then that's when they die from preventable causes. So that's why we created Neopenda. It's a wearable vital signs monitor that's worn on a baby's forehead, and it measures 4 different vital signs: pulse rate, respiratory rate, oxygen saturation, and temperature. All of this wirelessly connects to a centralized dashboard on a tablet where a nurse can get real-time alerts when any baby is in distress, and she can provide more timely and appropriate response to all of these patients. So we didn't just start out with an idea and get to final product. It took many years of iterations, and I wanted to just kind of highlight what that looks like. So here's a slide of all the different iterations that we did have. We started the company in 2015 with the idea of putting a monitor in a baby hat. We thought the baby hat would add additional warmth to patients, so we really loved the idea. We took that out to Uganda and the nurses hated it. They said that it's really difficult to clean the hats, it's really difficult to maintain, and it's not really single use. Any single use products will inevitably get reused, so it actually introduces more risk than it could add the benefit. But they did really love the idea of a vital signs monitor and being able to continuously monitor patients. So the second image is what we did in a lab. It was really fun when I was breadboarding and coming up with the electronics, but I wouldn't even want to put that on my face. So we, of course, had to miniaturize it and create some initial prototypes. So the next few images are kind of the initial prototypes and how we got to different stages. And then the final image on the bottom left is our V3 version. Our V3 version is the more commercial ready product. But as you can see, it does take many iterations and many years to develop medical technologies. Now, we couldn't have done any of this without the continuous feedback from our stakeholders. We would often host engineering workshops. We would go to hospitals, shadow them, sometimes the night shift, sometimes becoming nurses, which I am not trained to do. So putting ourselves in the eyes of our users to really understand what the issues were, continuously get their feedback so that we can iteratively design our solution with and for them. So just a couple of numbers in the process, we've involved over 400 stakeholders in Africa, primarily in Uganda, but kind of across the continent. We've been to Uganda multiple times, even though we're based in Chicago in the US. And we have a team that's full-time based out in Uganda as well. So in addition to our users, there are a lot of different partners that enabled us to be here. We wouldn't be here without the funding support. So in the early days, we got a lot of funding from non-dilutive capital, from grants and competitions. When we were students in particular, I think there were a lot of business plan competitions and opportunities that we could apply for. Vodafone Americas Foundation and Cisco were two of our earliest funders, and both of those were prizes. So it was good to be able to use the funding to just get that initial traction and validation prior to getting investment. When we transitioned to the investor realm, that's when we looked to ADAP Capital. They were our first institutional investors. We did a couple of accelerator programs as well, and I can talk more about that in just a minute. But we did quite a few different avenues to get that initial funding. We needed product development partners. As a small and growing startup, it couldn't possibly hire a mechanical engineer, electrical, an embedded engineer, a software developer. It's just too difficult to do that. So we needed to bring on some partners that had expertise in developing medical technologies and could supplement where our team needed the help. And then we needed piloting and implementation partners. So these were, for us in particular, clinical partners that we could actually go to and test the devices on patients. Of course, there's a very rigorous regulatory and ethical approval process for that. And our partners were really influential in enabling us to get that to that stage. And then finally, the category that we had was mentorship. We couldn't do any of this without the mentorship that we had received. And this is from a variety of angles. One, to just keep me sane in the process. There are so many ups and downs of having a startup, and having somebody to bounce ideas off of was very crucial. Having the support from various universities was really beneficial, just to be able to leverage existing teams and networks that we could go to. We did do several accelerators throughout the process. Our very first one was called Relevant Health. It was a product development accelerator. We actually did this while we were still in grad school and kind of starting Neopenda, so it was an interesting commute between DC and New York. But it was really influential in helping us think about how to actually develop a product and and let that drive the business model. Um, so it really kind of bolstered, especially because our team at that stage was consisting of engineers. We didn't have business backgrounds at that point. So it was really important for us to go through the accelerator process to understand more of the business aspects, because that is equally as important as the product itself. We did a couple of other accelerators, Techstars, that enabled us to get mentorship from the technology realm. So a lot of the mentors from that program we still are in touch with. They invested money into the company as well. Mass Challenge, we got one of our clinical partners. That's how we are in touch with Tufts Medical Center, as well as a relationship with Philips, so larger medical device companies. And then GSBI, a couple different accelerator programs. And the point is that a lot of these accelerators are really influential, but you have to know what you want out of it. I think it's really easy to get into the cycle of doing accelerator after accelerator because the opportunities will exist. So going into the accelerator and understanding, I need mentorship in technology, or I need to strengthen my business plan, or I need funding and certain expertise that comes along with it, certain connections. So when looking at accelerators, definitely be sure to understand what value they can provide to you, and try to be a little bit selective about it. We have enjoyed every accelerator that we participated in, but we likely wouldn't be continuing in additional accelerators going forward because we're focused now on executing. And then finally, our team and our advisory board. I think this is very, very important. I started this with my co-founder Tess while we were in grad school, and I can't recommend enough having a co-founder. It's very, very difficult to do this alone, essentially, especially in the beginning. It's important to have somebody that has complementary skill sets. There was kind of a natural division in work. I was interested in the business side, even though I didn't have that background. Tess was interested in the tech side, so we really complemented each other, both in skill sets and interest. And it was nice to just bounce ideas off of each other. So I would highly recommend having a co-founder. I guess in some ways I got lucky by finding Tess while we were in grad school and starting it together, but there are many other resources, including accelerators, that can help you find a co-founder if you're stuck with that. We do have an incredible team that, again, is based in Uganda and in the US, all with dedicated expertise, and we couldn't do our efforts without the rest of the team or our advisory board. So I just wanted to highlight some of the different types of advisors who have helped us throughout this journey. We have global public health advisors. We've got international development. We have technology advisors, neonatologists on our board. So it's really important to have a variety of people that you could call on. It also doesn't have to be limited to your advisory board. There's a number of people that I call on a routine basis whenever I have questions or need help on brainstorming various ideas. But having a formal advisory board has been really beneficial for us as well. So to just kind of recap where we've been, the first few years we spent quite a bit of time doing some market and user research. This involved many trips to Uganda. It involved understanding how the business and the product would go together. And then we did a heavy round of product R&D. So we created the several prototypes. Again, this involved going back to Uganda multiple times just to understand the process and get feedback iteratively from our users. And then we filed a patent. We did our proof of concept studies on bench test and formal testing, and we're now going through our final clinical trials prior to sales in later this year. So we're really excited about the progress that we've made. It is a lengthy journey, I think, particularly for medical devices. Just it's different from software or any other products where there isn't as much of a regulatory burden. Every company does have their own unique challenges, and I'm just going to breeze through it. I know there's a lot of text on the slide, so I just wanted to highlight it. And then if you have questions, I think there's a Q&A session, so feel free to ask the questions after that. So I think I've mentioned, user-centric design approach does take significant time in the field. We go out there pretty often. We still do, and we will always continue to do that. Regulatory is challenging, especially in the markets that we are intending to sell product into, and that's because they are actively developing their regulatory bodies. So just kind of working within cultural norms, within existing regulations, has been a challenge. Funding has always been a challenge, will always be a challenge, I think, for every startup. So just kind of keeping in mind how long it takes to get that funding and what you use the funding for is really, really important. Cultural differences are so important, and I can't emphasize that enough. Relationships and trust are everything. We often come in with an American mindset to an emerging market, and I think it's important to be open and honest and understanding of the community, because not every idea that we have here in the US is applicable to other communities. So embrace all of the feedback and the cultural differences that do exist. There are a variety of other ones in business development, logistical challenges. With our team, we still have Wi-Fi limitations. Sometimes it rains really hard and we just can't get in touch with our team. So there are all sorts of different challenges that are unique for emerging markets, which is where we're targeting, but generally for startups as well. But the reason why we do this is because there is such a massive opportunity for impact. It's been such a phenomenal journey, and at the end of the day, we can honestly say that we are working to improve the quality of care for newborns around the world, and that is something that we can't beat. So we go through all these challenges, all the ups and downs, because we are really passionate about saving these babies' lives. And there's such a global movement that's happening right now that's focusing on this. So we're really excited to be a part of this. And even beyond the impact, I think there's such a massive opportunity for the medical device market. When we look at the market itself, people often think of the biggest markets as being the US and Western Europe. But if we can figure out how to sell devices for 85% of the world's population, that is a much larger market. And we are seeing the trends that it's growing much faster than in the US. So entering into a market where there are less players, you can couple impact with sustainability and profitability, and they really go hand in hand. So I'm going to stop there. I know I touched on a lot of things. Happy to answer questions at the end of it, but thank you for your time, and I'll turn it over to Sayuri.
Sona, thank you so much. And that was a lot of information. But I just wanted to let everybody know that we will do the Q&A after both Sona and Rebecca's presentation. But you don't have to wait to put your questions in. There should be a Q&A button on your Zoom screen. Use that to type in your questions as you think of it, and we will get to them after Rebecca. So now I'd like to introduce Rebecca, who is another amazing social entrepreneur, and I'll let Rebecca tell her own story. Rebecca, take it away. Rebecca, you're on mute. You want to unmute yourself?
Hello. Hi, everyone. It's good to see you all on the interwebs. Here is my screen. All right. Can everyone see my screen? All right, cool. So my name is Rebecca. I'm the founder of Root Studio. We are a studio that works with last generation minority artists around the world, and we create ways for them to share their culture and stories through a royalty licensing model. But today I'm gonna go into the, peel way back into the beginning. I think a lot of times you'll ask me, how did a Chinese looking girl with an American accent end up in India for almost a decade working with indigenous artists? And so I think a lot with the social entrepreneurship journey, there's so many different phases and windy paths. And I always go back to this corny line that is what is the why that makes you cry? A lot of people ask me, did you have a 2-year plan? Did you have a 4-year plan? And then when did you decide? How would you quit if things didn't work out? And I think for me, a lot of it was just waking up every day and realizing that what I'm putting my hands to matches with what my values are, and it felt right. And that what I was doing during that day were things that were utilizing my skills. So to give you a little bit of my background, I'm again Chinese American. I've moved schools about 9 times before I turned 18. That was because my father was a sabbatical professor. And I lived in Hong Kong for a big chunk of my childhood. And this is my grandma who raised me for a good chunk of my time in Hong Kong. And as you can see in the background, that's not Hong Kong, that's the Grand Canyon in Arizona, where I moved to. And so it took me another 15 years after growing up in the US and going to college here to finally go back to Hong Kong. And it had been about 10 years since I had seen my grandma. So I went back to Hong Kong and I went to the apartment that she used to host me at when she brought me to school. I rung on the bell, and when she opened the door, she asked me, "Who are you?" She had no recollection of who I was, and I kept pointing to photos around the house of images when I was young and had been going to school with her. Um, but I realized that as she came into my room every 5 minutes to ask me where we were eating breakfast, she was going through early dementia, and that made that struck me into thinking about how I actually knew very little about my grandma. And I started to try and collect artifacts and relics all around her apartment and realized that because we don't have a recollection of uh, these stories, we don't really know the people behind us. So that semester, I ended up writing an autobiography of her life, trying to collect all of these images, the textiles, and the relics that she had left behind. And I learned that she had 4 brothers who she grew up with, but she wasn't allowed to pursue an education. And she came to Hong Kong alone when she was 15. And she started to make ends meet just by selling food on the streets, creating an informal leasing business, which had a lot of demand because there was such a large influx of immigrants coming from the Cultural Revolution. And that to me was really at the grit of what entrepreneurship is about. When it seems like all hope is lost, you create opportunity out of a struggle, and that you keep applying resilience to that. And so as I graduated from college, I ended up on a Fulbright, and I ended up on a Fulbright to India. I was doing a lot of work looking at human-animal coexistence, particularly in the rural areas. And the things that really struck me about the rural areas, oftentimes we think about how resource constrained it might be. But what actually struck me the most was how much creativity and vibrancy there was. And also how much of a link there was with the same intergenerational loss between their culture and the modern contemporary world that wasn't able to carry on a lot of these artifacts and crafts. And that really struck a link also with me and how I didn't know my own history because I didn't have the opportunity to hear from the previous generations. But then you have these amazing designs, things that were everyday objects, such a different relationship with materiality. Where, for instance, this is one of the artists we work with, Landa John. She has this indigo batik, and everything that she wears is something that she draws. And she makes this out of wax resin and batik. Such a different relationship with clothing in the way that we think about fashion in the modern world. And every single design has a story behind it. And it's being told in and every time you ask any of these grandmas about the designs, they have it's almost walking through their entire lives. It's an autobiography in itself, but very little anthropological work has been done about it. And when you look at why there's so much loss and why we're going through this generation of massive cultural extinction, you have to face the practical reality that people need money, and that why is it fair for them to continue practicing these extraordinarily labor intensive processes when they need income. So recognizing that as a practical reality, I started to ask myself, how do we actually capture this creative abundance? When people think about rural areas, they often think about scarcity, but if we can turn this brilliant creativity into some form of a sustainable income, would that be a win-win solution, both on the culture preservation angle and also enabling and encouraging them to have a sense of pride in their own heritage? So one of the first things that we thought about was, if we can harness creativity using technology, not to displace these skills, but to enhance it, what would that look like? So in one of the villages that I've been working in for years in Madhya Pradesh in India, we brought in an animator, and we asked him to listen to all the stories of the artists. And he worked with 4 artists and started creating an animation based off of the narration of these folklores. So they would take the artwork and then it would turn into something more. And this is the first time any of this artwork has leapt off from a village scroll into something that was more. And then I then took another idea of, how do we take these designs, and if we could turn this into a really concrete economic stream beyond just a one-time sale, would that potentially really elongate the income potential of these art forms? So we took an art form in Rajasthan, and we did a workshop with 3 artists, and we put them on a line of 7 notebooks, and that whole journal series earned over $30,000 in revenue. So the reality of everything I've talked about here is that, I found this why, and I found this reason that I was really willing to continue pursuing. But it's so hard to do that when you really have no home and you also don't have money. So this is about 4 years in on that journey, and I was pretty tired. I was living on about $4,000 a year, which can go quite a way when you're living in India, but still really hard to really build something and create something with that. And so I had to sort of learn the hard way that passion doesn't feed people. I had started to realize, okay, I really need money to continue working with these artists and continue these workshops where we were going to try different things to try and see how we can bridge the artwork to the global economy. And so I would write all these grant applications, and they were like, look how amazing this art from Madhya Pradesh is, look how amazing these people are. But then I would get one email after another saying, sorry, we can't fund you. And after 26 grant rejections, I was feeling pretty discouraged. But at the same time, I had a pretty fixed mindset of what my passions were, rather than what is it that people would be willing to come on this journey with you on. And so a lot of the transition from concept to pilot was also realizing how to take what you've seen and what you're passionate about, and the injustices that you might face as a social entrepreneur, and all the brokenness that you see in the world, and turn that into creation. By creating and bridging, that's the way and path that we can start healing the divides that exist in this world, and doing so persistently. So I didn't have much of a resort after completely running out of money. And so I knew that I previously had a pretty good track record of getting, 4K, 5K grants when I was in college, especially for projects that didn't have that much traction. So I applied to MIT for urban planning in grad school, and I got in. And in that first year, I was pretty confused, because I was fearful that I had just left all these artists that I've been working with, and was I in some ways betraying that? But MIT presented this really amazing opportunity for me to both restore personally, and also to redirect and create structure around the why that I cared so much about. Not only that, MIT was also this mango tree of opportunities. I was just getting all these emails about the different business plan competitions that existed out there, and also grants. So we just started applying to them, and we used to be called the Toto Express. It's a longer story, but I wrapped this pitch. We didn't win. And then we did the MIT Arts competition. We didn't final. But then a year in, we won a $10,000 grant from the MIT Ideas Global Challenge. And I remember crying because I was like, I don't even know what to do with 10K. I just, survived on 4K for a year in India. And in some ways that started to turn the tides of both encouraging us and also having some pretty concrete funds to go further with what we were doing. And then the next year we had to apply again to the MIT Creative Arts Competition and we won it. And then Sophia Maruso of the Girl Boss Foundation then gave us another grant. And because she had some notoriety in the fashion world, that started to give us credibility as well. And then we won more grant competitions. And this is another pitch competition that we were rejected from the year before, but then we won now after having refining our business model even further. And then we started to do incubators and accelerators, including MIT Delta V. And then we finally got Echoing Green, which is an early stage social entrepreneurship fellowship. And in some ways, Echoing Green acts as what they call an echoing chamber, just because of the credibility they also have in the social entrepreneurship world. And so over time, we started to do a number of incubators and accelerators. And as Sona mentioned, it can be a lot of work to be doing a lot of them. So it's important to be discerning of what makes sense. But I would say they're largely helpful because as you're on this entrepreneurship journey, it scales beyond yourself. When you are going beyond concept or pilot, you are trying to create essentially a movement and a network of people who also believe in what you're trying to solve. And I would say that's really helpful in terms of finding funders, but it's also super helpful in terms of finding other teammates. As I mentioned, the we is always bigger than the I. And along this journey, we've built teams of community organizers, designers, technologists, and salespeople across all the regions that we work in to give us both the depth and relationships that we have with the communities we work with, and also the caliber and the ability to sell in the markets that we sell in. And they're also there for you on the everyday bad days. My teams tends to think that I need to get more facials, so there's a clip from that. And we ended up pitching at TechCrunch Disrupt San Francisco in 2017.
All right, judges. It seems the social impact potential here is tremendous, right? You're bringing access to monetizing the gifts of people in diverse parts of the world. But help us to see how, from a big business standpoint, you create something here.
I think with her question, it really comes to summarize this whole journey that we've been on, which is you have all this, you've been working on this problem, but in some ways the path towards scalability and creating something that's sustainable, you also have to think about how will this be more self-perpetuating. So I think a lot of the incubators and accelerators and business plan competitions we went through helped us refine that even more, whether we got the money or we were rejected. When we left MIT, it paved the way to help us to raise more institutional capital. And that's Sayuri. And also enable us to continue to amplify our network, to have collaborators that can help us introduce us to other sales partners. So I would say in general, going through the whole gamut of business plan competitions, fundraising, it's tiring and it could be really discouraging. But I think what it helps do, it helps you continue to refine some elements of what you do, so that it can have more long-lasting impact. But at the same time, even though you can be getting a lot of advice, it's not always the right advice. And it's always really important to remember your why, and that you're a social entrepreneur because you're not trying to stay within the status quo. You're trying to break the industry for good. And so for us, a lot of what we started to move towards in terms of how do we challenge the larger industry norms and also create this fundamental mission of of livelihood generation for these communities, we saw this opportunity in the way that fashion was constantly appropriating from different cultures. And I started to research and investigate more how are trends and fashion set. And there was a pretty predictable rhythm, but you would see designs from India or from China on people's clothing in Soho, New York, and there wasn't much context or meaning behind why it was there other than it was just taken off of Pinterest. And in fact, when you look at how trends and designs are sourced, the market size of that is actually quite massive. Each season, there's a particular trend. And I kept thinking about how the communities we work with can do that in a much more environmentally reverent way, and also with so much heart and so much meaning. So that started to shape what Root Studio became. We started to take the years of relationships we've built with our community artists and our know-how of workshopping, and we train artists to digitize their designs. We created a way for all of these designs to be stored into a portal that designers of different retail brands across the United States and Europe can then view and rent these designs for a season. All these designs that would then have otherwise been out of season are now tagged to the next 3 years of trends, so that a design that might have been forgotten now is setting the future trend of fashion. And each of these designs then are watermarked and linked back to the artist and the bank account of the artist as well. And after a season, design can also go back to the library, so it can be rented again. On top of that, we see that a lot of the brands are really interested in telling the stories of the artists and the communities. And we want to make sure that that also goes back to the artist. So we charge brands a royalty if they want to tell that story, which goes back to a community fund for every single community that they're telling the story of. Here are just some of the brands that we started going on this journey with. And you'll start to see some of our Root Studio designs in their stores come fall 2020. So for instance, this is the Warli art form. There's fewer than 50 artists left in Maharashtra. And this is a design that has then now been turned into a variety of products for outdoor research. Same, again, the Warli art community that can be used for packaging. And just goes to show, it's not just about the fashion or the home industry, it's about this fundamental thesis of bridging this creative abundance, this creative content and stories of these brilliant artists into markets that desperately are seeking authenticity in this world of plasticity. And so finally, to cap off some of our learnings, in this journey, right, as entrepreneurs, we're always told to continue to scale up and grow and grow and grow. But again, we should always remember to scale back to who we're working for and with, and the why of why we're doing this. And I think in this landscape, it can often feel like a mango tree, but always kind of remembering the why is really important as we pivot and navigate meandering roads. So even though we now work across several regions and have replicated this model, we commit to extraordinary, transparent, and community organizing systems, having quarterly profit returns to show our dedication. Even if there are no profit returns, we make sure that there's a consistent dialogue. We have full-time community organizers that go back to the communities to have meetings to identify needs and what the community wants to invest returns within their community for. And every single design that we have is linked back to the product and the bank account of that artist, including also their contact information. And so in trying to balance both of these worlds, we learned so many lessons in doing business out in the States, and also being community organizers. We learn a lot that, you know, what might work out in one place also doesn't work universally. In fact, oftentimes when we're building trust and relationships with the artists, it's so much of the opposite of what we're taught to do on the sales side. It's really not about contracts. this was us signing a contract in China last year, and it's a pretty funny video because there's Star Wars blasting in the background, and there's these women in cheetahs. But you know, when I went to Guizhou to start a pilot about a year and a half ago, I had much less time than in the past when I used to spend a lot of time with the community to build trust and rapport. I had just a week, and so I went to talk to the community leader and I introduced what we did with Root Studio. I gave them all these contracts and I said, here's our copyright licensing contract. This is what we've done. This is what we've accomplished. And for the whole day, he wasn't having it. He seemed to not completely trust our intentions. And I was exhausted. I was like, look, I just put out all these contracts. Why doesn't he, trust where we're going with this? And so we took a break and he said, I'm gonna go get a popsicle stick from the fridge outside and I'm gonna come back. And I was like, okay. So he comes back and he hands me a popsicle stick and he says, okay, we'll work with Root Studio. And I was like, what happened? Did like someone put something in your popsicle stick? And he said, no, I saw your shoes and you have holes in your shoes. And if you were here to exploit us, you wouldn't wear shoes like this. A lot of times people ask us like, well, do you have contracts? Like, do these artists like know they're protected through contracts and whatnot? It's like, yes, we do have that in terms of protection. But a lot of it is also at the heart, intentionality in how we relate with people, and understanding and being observant of the community itself. In the last example I'll go through, we also work with a community in Luochuan in Shanxi, and these artists, they engage in this paper cutting technique and they live in these cave dwellings, and there was a photographer on our team who was trying to document their lives and their stories in a very authentic way. But he is a blonde hair, blue-eyed kid from Austin, Texas, who was going to be documenting this. But Kyle was someone that spoke fluent Chinese and had lived in China for 5 years. So this was his approach in building rapport. 看谁都是贴死。哎，我估计是我放架子，这长没架放架子。在心中点起心，放出心爱的新娘，这哗啦啦啦啦啦啦。
夜空中最亮的星，是否听清？那心灵后悔流泪的眼睛，给我再去相信的勇气。哦，越过谎言去拥抱你。 每当我找不到存在的意义，每当我迷失在黑夜里。
And after that, Kyle sort of became a village celebrity, and people were more than interested in wanting to share their stories with him. So, just kind of wrapping up, I think, in this whole social entrepreneurship journey, we tend to always benchmark ourselves around how much we've raised or how many stakeholders we've reached or what are all these numerical numbers. And as we scale and grow bigger and bigger, it's always important to remember what is our why. Who are we working with, and what are we hoping to create in the world? And that's it. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Rebecca. Do you want to stop your screen share?
Yeah.
Okay. So, as you can see, both of them had pretty long journeys, and one thing I hope you see from this is it takes resilience and persistence, but if you are passionate and committed, you can get through it. But now it's time for Q&A, and please feel free to ask questions that relates to your experiences, in addition to kind of understand what Rebecca and Sona have gone so far, and I'm sure they will be great in helping advise you and guide you as you go through your own journey. So with that, again, there's a Q&A button, and put your question in. And I have the first question, and this is for Sona. Sona, I think you can read this question on your screen, but I'll read it as well so that everybody else can hear the question. It says, since worldwide patent applications aren't cheap, did you have any debate about the return on your patent investment? Was it a requirement from investors? Was there any discussion about the practical aspects of enforcing patents in countries like Uganda? Was it intended to build a portfolio for trading of patent rights to avoid being blocked? Sona.
Yeah, really great question. I think the patent discussion is always looming, even now, even after we filed for it. So happy to discuss, and we can take it offline if it ends up being a lengthy answer. The short answer is it wasn't a requirement from investors. It was more an internal team decision, and we were very conscious about which countries we wanted to file in. So we did do a PCT patent, which gives you the opportunity to file a patent in specific countries. But once your PCT patent is up, then you do have to file in countries. And if we were to file in all 54 countries in Africa, it would be one, very expensive, two, very time consuming, and three, just potentially not worth it. I think your second question around the practical aspects of enforcing patents was a lot of the discussion that we had internally with our team. We ended up filing for our patent in the US, Europe, Japan, and Kenya. So on the continent, on the African continent, there are many countries where the patent regulations are certainly developing. Some of them are in their infancy, some of them are more well protected. We chose Kenya, one, because our presence is largely in East Africa at this point, and Kenya is the most established in terms of their patent protection. We're not as concerned about another competitor coming in and taking market share unless it's a larger competitor like Medtronic or some of the bigger the Philips, the larger medical device companies. It was more just to protect ourselves in case we wanted to expand in the future to other communities. Did that help answer your question? Feel free to let me know if you have more questions about that.
Yeah, if you have follow-up questions, just go ahead and type it in as well. The second question is for Sona, but I think Rebecca can answer this as well. And the question is, how did you pick your investors? Why don't we start with Sona and then Rebecca after?
Yeah, so picking your investors, that's a very good question. And I love that you framed it as picking your investors, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs get into the trap of they will take investment from anyone. We have turned down an investment before, and part of it was because it wasn't the best decision for the company. I think it's very, very important to have investors that fully believe in your mission and aren't going to, your mission, your vision, and aren't going to sway you in different directions. We often get the question around, you could make a lot more money by selling our vital signs monitor to parents who want to monitor their baby's vitals at home. That is often a telltale question. It's a very fair question, but I think if the discussion ends up being too lengthy about that, that ends up being a good indicator that it's not the right fit between us and our investor. Our entire market, our entire thesis is that medical devices in emerging markets is a much bigger opportunity. So if we find that investors are asking us questions that will sway the vision of the company too significantly, beyond, you know, the why, as Rebecca talked about, then, you know, that was a no for us. Sometimes you can't really be quite so choosy, and it is a back and forth between your investors and not, but I think especially in the early days, relationships are so important. It's a lot less, again, as Rebecca mentioned, about the contract, and it's a lot more about what type of relationship have you developed with an investor. Have they been able to give you advice? Are they asking questions that will help you strengthen your company, or are they asking you questions and hardballs just to kind of throw you off for no reason?
Rebecca, would you like to answer that too?
Yeah, I think Sona tackled it pretty well, but I would say uh, going on a investor relationship with a entrepreneur is also like a marriage. You want to have a good feeling about it, and a lot of the due diligence process is a pretty good indicator of how they will also be as investors. The type of feeling that you get, the type of questions they're asking, the terms and the ways in which they are also negotiating with you tells you also a lot about how they'll be. And so for us, we also have turned down investments where we feel like there just isn't really good alignments. I often ask investors if they were to paint a vision of where Roots would be as a success metric, what does that look like? And I think if that's not coinciding with what you see the vision as, that's something to watch out for as well. Yeah.
Thank you. The next question is for Sona, relating to patent as well. How long did it take to patent the idea?
A long time. So we started the idea in 2015. We filed for a provisional patent to begin with, and then you get a year to kind of iterate on the concept and file for an actual patent after that. We filed for a PCT patent, which gave us another 18 months for us to decide which countries we wanted to specifically file in. And then we submitted, once we found the countries that we wanted to submit in, we're actually still going through the process of getting patented on it. So we're still patent pending, and it's been 5 years. So it takes quite a lengthy amount of time, but the patent pending part of it is sufficient for most of what we're looking for. You still get priority back to that original date that you filed for it. I think the key is finding the right patent attorney. Who, for us, it was important to have a semi hands-off approach because we didn't have a ton of time to invest in coming up with the patent application. So after the original provisional patent, our attorney has been really great in kind of taking lead on that. It does take a little bit of time, a good bit of money, but was important for our business model.
Okay, maybe I'll ask a last question to both of you. Through your journey so far, what was the most challenging experience you had, and how did you overcome them? Rebecca, why didn't you go first this time? Besides not starving in China or India.
Let's see. Yeah, I mean, I think I would say I would probably answer this more on a philosophical level than like, okay, this is like the one thing that was really hard. But I think in working with artists, and as someone who is a designer and artist, trying to combine that with the world of money and the relationship between artists and money has been the full Root Studio journey. Artists are often on the forefront of gentrification. Once a city becomes too expensive, the artistic class flees, even though they're the ones that usually give that area a lot of vibrancy. So I think there's been a lot of really interesting challenges and philosophical questions about how do we build this thing that doesn't make us lose out on the gift of what these artists are creating by turning it into a commodity. But at the same time, like creating a totally new path for that, you know, both worlds can collide, whether that's the way that we think about scale, the way we think about fundraising, the way we think about how we price these designs, how we work with brands. So yeah, I would say that's a pretty large question that we have always and will continue to wrestle with.
Sona.
I can't narrow it down too much, so I'm going to say two. So the first one is prioritization. I think as this is particularly true the further along we get, there are so many competing priorities, and I think it's always everything is urgent and everything needed to be done yesterday. So trying to figure out exactly, what is the most urgent, and making sure that your whole team is aligned on that. It hasn't been necessarily a challenge for the team, but something that we do spend quite a bit of time in regular team meetings, in one-on-ones, just making sure that everybody is aligned on, what are the actual things that need to get done and why. So that's the first piece of it. And then the second piece is also a little bit more philosophical. I think working in emerging markets as social entrepreneurs, there are so many things, so many problems that need fixing, so many opportunities that are available. And I think it does for us, especially when we're going through fundraising rounds, it's important for me to be thinking a little bit about, well, why is it important for somebody to invest in Neopenda as opposed to another organization that's also doing some pretty amazing work? And why is this investment much more important? And obviously, we've been doing this for so long, and there are a million reasons why I can say that's true for us, but it's important to kind of remind yourself of that there are so many other opportunities that are out there, and you really do need to believe in your why beyond anything else. And I think that shows through in all the conversations that you have with your users, with your investors, with a variety of stakeholders. So it's important to constantly remind yourself. And the way that we do that is usually by going back to Uganda. Every time I enter into a hospital, there's this really weird feeling of, gosh, there are so many problems that need fixing, and it does take, you feel like you're running a mile a minute, which we are, but at the same time, it's the inspiration for why we're doing this. We see babies die right in front of us, and it's such a difficult thing to see, but it's also why we're working as efficiently as we can to get the product out there. So yeah, I guess prioritization and reminding yourself of the why and staying true to that.
Rebecca and Sona, thank you so much for participating today. And I think you both are awesome. So thanks for sharing, and thanks for all the folks that joined us to listen to their stories.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks for joining us. And for more information on how to connect with the MIT Alumni Association, please visit our website.